Hey y'all, are you ready to get started with some painting? I am. I have been too long without painting. I'll tell you, I'm going to move you a little bit closer. Yesterday I worked on this, and you can look for the video if you're interested in that. This is a chalkboard that I made from an art piece, and I'll show you the original of that in just a minute. But this is curing now, and we'll need to have chalk rubbed across it to to season it. But this is a traditional look of a chalkboard, and I did this one yesterday, and I did it out of this same exact picture right here that we're about to use today, to use the more non-traditional colors. But here's what not to do. I was tired and I went home early and left luckily these kind of brushes in the paint whenever I took off, so that's trash or to be used for some other decoration later. But I'm going to, today, I'm going to use on the frame part of the frame, I'm going to use the DIY Cowgirl Coral, because that's very close to the color of the year. Hey Liz. And I'm going to mix it with a little bit of petticoat pink, because I don't want just the solid coral. But when I was thinking about wanting to do the frame in that, what I'm going to use this for is to mark paint and paintbrush prices and things like that out in the store area. I was thinking those colors with the black, it would just be kind of too much. So I decided to go with a letterpress gray as the actual chalkboard part on this. So rather than being black in the middle, it's going to be gray in the middle, but it's still going to be, you know, more of a time-worn, rustic kind of look. I have another project I'm going to start after this, but I'll mention that, you know, in a minute, and if y'all are interested, and I'll do it in a separate video, so that if somebody's not interested in my white project, they don't have to hang out with it. So what I'm going to move the camera down now to where you can see more of the work and less of me. And I don't have my tablet in here, so I may or may not be able to see any comments during, but if you have comments or questions or anything, I'll get back to them afterward. I'm going to push that far enough out of the way that I don't get paint all over it, because I am just a slinging. I don't know if any of y'all remember that tune, or if that was just something that happened down here. I just grabbed up, I still have the good, this is a Dixie Belle OS brush that I have out here from yesterday, and then I just grabbed another chip brush and just a bucket of brushes that I had sitting there to grab out of. So I think the smartest thing would be for me to do portions of the frame first, because I can touch that up after. And I'm just taking a butter knife and popping these seals so I don't look like a, what did they used to call it, a 90-pound weakling when I can't open the jars. And let's do the same to the letterpress gray, because it's not going to matter if a little bit of gray gets on the edges of the pink and the coral, because I will come back like I did in the other one. If you can still see it over there, I came back with a lot of the darker around the edges to frame that in. Okay, which brush we're going to use? I'm going to mist just a tad with my water. I don't want a whole lot on here, because this is glass. This is somebody who worked at a hotel who changed their art, gave me these, and this is just an old fake metal looking frame and a glass piece of artwork. And I don't know why I want to do it this way. Let's just start with the coral, and I'm just going to use the chip brush, dampen it a little bit, because the DIY is a clay-based paint and it does need water. And I'm gonna set a good example today and pour some of my paint out in something to use, rather than dipping in and chancing contaminating my batch. I'm getting a good bit on here, because I do want to just kind of Liz, I have Dia, if you're local here in Louisiana, I have DIY here at my store. But if not, I have an affiliate link, like a web address that sends you to sort of my portion of it at the DIY website, and I'll put that in the comments for you whenever I'm done. But I was looking to see if there was, it's $13 for this size. And that's what they would call a sample size. I call a small because you get a lot of uses out of that. And I only buy the pints and the quarts in the colors that I use a lot of. Like my black yesterday, I don't do a whole lot of black, but I do enough of it to need it in a pint. And some of the whites and the off-whites and stuff like that, I get those in the quarts, because like the crinoline, I get that in the quarts because I use enough of it that it's, you know, less expensive per ounce to get it in the quart than it is the sample size. But I don't do as many large projects in the in some of the colors, so I get it here. Oh yeah, hey, I could deliver to Dallas Fort Worth. How about that? It's only a 6-hour drive. But yeah, there's I definitely will put my link in the comments here in a minute. It's a really cool paint. It is clay based, and there's no VOCs. It's, you know, if you wanted to take a bite out of it for some reason, I don't know why you would, but you could, and you wouldn't die. But it makes it very thick and chalky, and when it completely cures, which is in about 30 days, it will have almost like a stucco type of a finish to it. You can paint canvases with it or furniture with it, and it, you know, most of the time is not going to require prep work. That's how I'm going straight over this glass and straight over these this fake metal stuff here without having to put a primer on or a slick stick or anything on that, because it, most of the time, sometimes when a surface is really slick, it's smart to use a primer. But I've seen too many of my, you know, friends and colleagues do it on glass. That's why I'm going straight on glass and doing this and not worrying about it much at all. But anyway, it doesn't have any type of like top coat in it. You know how if you were just getting some paint at Sherwin-Williams or wherever, it would, when you got done painting, you would be done with it because it has a sealer. That's the word I was looking for. It has a sealer already in it. But the DIY paint does not have a sealer in it. You always will have to seal it with either like a water-based poly, which they have one. They have something called liquid patina in a clear and a dark, and they have something called Big Top, which is like a water-based poly, and or you can wax over it. And then you can make colored waxes and all that as well. So it's very versatile like that. But if I was to let this dry and then not put a top coat on it and spray it with some water, you know, 3 or 4 days from now, before it's had time to fully cure, it's going to come right back up and reactivate the paint that's on there. And it'll remove it. So you have to, you know, there's a little bit of a learning curve. I'm using a baby wipe now. There's a little bit of a learning curve for what's called wet distressing, which if this was like that one's dry, instead of taking sandpaper to partially distress it, I could distress that right now with this baby wipe or with a wet washcloth or whatever. So that's a good part of it. Until the sealer is on it, you can reactivate it and reuse it. Now I've got about this much left in my little bucket there. Can you see how much that is? Not much, but man, I hate to be wasteful. But I'm gonna let that dry a little bit and then probably use the same brush to do my pink. And I'm gonna go ahead and use my good brush, which is right here, and start putting some letterpress gray in the center. Pour a little bit of this. These are called, you get these from like Restaurant Supply or whatever, and they're called boats. It's called a boat. But they're, you know, like you would get, I don't know if they still do it a lot of places, like you used to would get a hamburger basket in or french fries, except for this is a tiny one. And you can get them in any sizes, and you get them at Sam's or wherever. I have a coffee shop, so we have these because we serve sweets and things in them. So I'm getting a little bit on there, not a whole lot, down at the bottom of my brush. These brushes hold a lot, and then we're just going to paint right over this glass. I wanted this one to be a little more colorful, since it is going to be, you know, like my pricing sign for my paints and stuff that I have in the artisan market here. When you're doing the chalkboard finish as well, it's going to take about 3 coats. And this paint dries pretty fast, so you can, you know, put the coats on within an hour or so. But what I'm going to do is put, and can y'all still see that good? Let me move that over. Is put the first coat on going horizontally. Then I'll flip this thing around and put the next coat on going vertically, and then I'll come back around and put my last coat on going horizontally again, and that gives a little bit of texture to my chalkboard. As you can see, there's going to be a little bit of my cowgirl coral showing up there, and because I didn't dry all that, but there's no need because this is the first of 3 coats. It's not going to show through when I get to the 3rd coat. And DIY just came out with their own line of brushes. I'm waiting on mine to get here, but they have a very similar brush to this on there. They're imported by the Paint Pixie from Italy, and they're very good brushes, like the natural bristle brushes that I usually use of the Paint Pixie, but they're like a man-made bristle like this one is. And so you can check those out too if you're wanting a brush that's shaped. Oops, I got some on there. That's okay. That's shaped like this one. You'll have those to look at on that link whenever I put it on there. And I'll do that right as we're through. Okay, let me see if I can blow dry enough to be able to put the petticoat pink on this outside part. It's, to me, that letterpress spray and that cowgirl coral are looking really nice together, so I'm kind of proud that that turned out how I wanted it to. And hopefully you can see, let me see if I can pull you in any closer, that as this paint dries, there we go. As this paint dries, it'll get lighter and lighter. And that's, you know, right now we're looking at it straight out of the thing, that it still has the water in it and the water from our brush, and it's, you know, activated the paint. But see how much lighter this is over here already, that as it's drying. And that's sort of how we'll know to put on our 2nd coat. But the tip also, when you go to put on the 2nd coat, you still, with this paint, because it's dry and because it's thick, you still need a little bit of water in your brush. And I may mist it very, very lightly with this. But if I put too much water on there whenever I'm doing that, that's going to totally reactivate this cowgirl coral, and it's going to mix in with that petticoat pink and give a 3rd color, and, you know, take some of this up and totally be not what we were going for. So that's where I'll give you one more tip. If you absolutely did not want that to happen, if you absolutely did not want a chance that your undercolor and your next color would marry in any kind of way, or blend to form another color, you would stop after this coat, go ahead and put on a liquid patina or a big top. I don't have a big top sitting here, but go ahead and put on a top coat, not a wax, but go ahead and put on one of the other top coats, and that would seal this color in so that it would not blend with the next color you're putting on it. But I'm kind of not worried about mine blending because I want a unique sort of mixture of the colors out there. So I'm not going to do that. But with the other frame, I did do that yesterday. After the white, I put on a thin coat all the way around of the black, and then I went over it with the liquid patina and let that settle in. Then I went back over it with a little bit of white, like in these indentations, because it got darker than I wanted, and then I went back with the black around the edges, and I didn't seal that. But that's, you know, options that you have with this paint. So now I'm going to go ahead and put some of the petticoat pink over the cowgirl coral. And I almost want to dry brush this on. I'm not wanting it to take over and be the main color. I'm still wanting the peach color to be my main color. So what I'm going to do is dip here in the lid and then tap it on my thing there, and let's just get a little on here. Try to get a little of it out so there's not a lot. And I'm going to stay going in the same direction as the frame itself. Just kind of trying to get a little bit more in these indentations. Make it look a little bit older without changing it too awfully much. You see where I got a little bit more here and a little bit more there. That absolutely does not matter in the big scheme of things, but I am going to want to flip it up and get a little on these edges. This is just a dry, it's called a dry brush technique. You're really not wanting hardly anything on there at all. I'm tapping it on I've got my table covered with a drop cloth. Tapping it on the drop cloth after I get a little paint on it and just getting a tad on here. That's so thick I almost need water at this point, so I'm not going to dab it. But there's a lot of times you can find, I don't want to say ugly, but I'm going to say ugly. You can find old ugly pictures places at flea markets. You know, if it's a pretty something with a fine and dandy frame, well, then they're going to want a good price for it. But if you find, you know, a not so pretty, out of date picture that's faded on the inside with just a halfway decent frame, then that's where you're a winner here. I'm going to go back over this, around the edges this way, trying to hit those high points, but leave some of the lighter in there. And this is just with the same paint that was left on my brush from it sitting there. So I'm not being wasteful after all. See how that leaves the lighter color from the petticoat pink down in the grooves, but this hits our next coat back up and hits all the high points with our main color, the cowgirl coral. Let's see if I can do anything about that. There we go. So not too bad if I don't forget to throw that one away tonight. Okay, so now we're going, the first time we went this direction, let me dry this little piece so I don't pull that back off. See how fast that dries? So you won't have to do anything to this after you get the 3 coats of paint on here and you let it cure, and you rub the paint over it, not paint, but the chalk over it to season it. That you just rub the chalk, lay the chalk on its side and rub it all over the whole thing, getting a little bit of chalk everywhere, and that little bit of chalk will sink into the paint, the sort of the pores of the paint itself. And then you just take a dry rag and wipe off the excess chalk, and it will then make it to where any letters that you put on there don't sink in, and then when you try to take that, wipe that off, they're stuck in there. But if that was to ever happen, and you then you just take another coat of paint and you paint over it, and there you go. You can change the colors of this at any time. You can just add another coat if you're you know, if your words were to get stuck in there or whatever. We have a sign outside where we list like our daily specials and things like that. And I bet I have painted that thing with chalk paint. It was originally plastic, and whatever the sign material is they come in, like the sandwich board signs they call them. And we use, instead of regular chalk out there, a lot of times we use that waxy kind of, oh, they call it liquid chalk, I think is what it's called. And after it sits out there and bakes in the sun for, you know, months on end, it a lot of times you can't get all the words erased. So I just plop another coat on it. 10 years worth of paint on that thing, you know, plop another coat on it and get it back out there. So this crosshatch sort of a pattern just gives a little bit of texture to your chalkboard surface. Get a little bit more. And she has a Debi Beard, which is the lady who owns DIY Paint from Debi's Design Diary. She has a couple of other colors of gray if you wanted a little bit darker than this, or you could have done this in white, you could have done this in blue, I could have done the whole dang thing in, you know, in the cowgirl coral if I had so desired. Any of the paints can be a chalkboard paint as long as you don't put a finish over them. A top coat. But can you see the, let's see if I can bring that kind of, I don't know that I can. Whoa. There is a little bit of a crosshatch pattern to that, and that's going to help to sort of grab the chalk whenever you're writing on it in the long run. So, sort of to recap, when I'm done with this part, I will put a top coat, probably their big top, or probably the liquid patina because it's sitting right here already. And I'll put that over the peach part, the cowgirl coral, and just to sort of seal that in so I can quit worrying about it. And for the chalkboard portion, the letterpress gray, I'm going to put a third coat on, going then the other direction. So that'll be twice in one direction and once in the other direction to give it a good thick surface of chalkboard. And then I will not top coat that because that it will no longer be a chalkboard if you top coat it. So this could be finished, the outer edges could be finished in wax, they could be finished in, you know, any type of water-based poly or whatever poly you have already, if you have one already. It doesn't have to be, you know, brand exclusive, but they do have them that are, you know, also no VOC or low VOC and safe for children to be around and all that kind of stuff. Trying to give it a once over with all of my lines being straight. Okay, and I hope I don't regret this part because I'm going to, you know what I'm going to do it with. I got this one in the gray already. This is where I'm going to do similar to how I did that one. Get a little bit of the gray paint just on the edge there and try to wipe off the excess. And you know what, if I don't like this after I do it, I just let it dry and put another coat of the petticoat pink or the cowgirl coral on top of it. but I think it gives a good finished look to things when you frame them in, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is framing this in. And you can frame in from the inside as well. Let's see if I can do that. I kind of like that. See if I can do it going up this side. That shows a little bit more of the definition that's in the frame, but I'm not wanting to go all over it like I did that one and have the raised parts be gray. I want those to stay cowgirl coral. And I will be back on for another live here shortly. I'm in a challenge. Only a few days left. The flu sort of got me a late start, but the challenge is, how do you use white? And instead of painting a piece of furniture for that one, and you have to use at least 3 colors. Instead of doing a piece of furniture for that one, I'm going to do a canvas, and I'm going to do the starters of it, at least phase 1 of it, right here live in just a little while. But here you go. It will dry now. I'm going to let this dry naturally because I have to go do a little store work, and then I'll come back and put one more coat going in the other direction of the letterpress gray, and then I'll either put wax or probably liquid patina, because I have it right here on the outer edges of it, and then I'll probably leave it sitting in here on my work table until next week sometime before, and then I'll use the chalk to season it before I just write all the prices to my paints and stuff on it in the other room. And that's the same thing as we're doing with the other one there. Let me see if I can, there, hey. and that's the same thing I'm doing with the other one. Is I'm impatient. I'm not wanting to let it sit for 2 weeks. I just don't have the patience for that, but I should. And maybe I will with the other one, I don't know. But with this one, it's going to keep the same words on it all the time anyways for quite a while. So I'll probably Monday or something like that go ahead and put my pricing and stuff on it. And the other one, I may give it at least 2 weeks to start with that curing time, because we have daily specials and we'll be changing the wording on that daily. But I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I'll put my DIY affiliate link in the comments, and I appreciate, even y'all going and looking at that. That helps me out, and lets them know that I'm working hard to help people learn cool things about the paint. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.